The XFL is working to resolve some ongoing issues with the NFL Alumni Academy. This rumor has been kind of out there, but our own XFL insider, Mike Mitchell, has the full details on it. So, XFL 2023 has a lot of work to be done before the season kicks off in just over 2 months in February. Even though technically the XFL is a revived league, it doesn't exclude them from the typical hurdles that other startup professional leagues encounter on their way to launch. The reborn XFL 3.0 has had its fair share of starts, stops, and hiccups in its path to 2023. No shocker. In recent times, the XFL has added over 400 players to their team rosters and most recently unveiled their uniforms and league rules. However, the revived league faces several pressing issues as training camp rapidly approaches next month in Arlington. Chief among them at the moment is XFL 2023's tentative ongoing partnership with the NFL Alumni Academy. According to sources close to the situation, the XFL and Alumni Academy are working through resolving issues in their current partnership and agreement. The pause button is being pressed on the relationship until resolutions can be agreed upon. Remember The Rock, and still, XFL stuff is all over the NFL Alumni Academy's website talking about their partnership with the XFL, and this was in the past in April. So the numbers game is a pro football player's worst enemy, especially for aspiring professional athletes. Less than 2% of all college football players make the NFL. And even the ones that do have challenges sticking in the short and long term because time and space are working against them. Every single September, nearly 700 players on NFL teams are cut and left outside the 53-man roster and practice squads. It's a yearly occurrence. And on the flip side, players who have been on NFL teams get replaced yearly by hundreds of college athletes entering the league. It's a never-ending cycle of job uncertainty for football players. The formation of leagues like the XFL and entities like the NFL Alumni Academy is designed to combat the challenges players face in starting and continuing their pro careers. The XFL gives an avenue for players to start and continue their professional journeys, while at the same time, the NFL Alumni Academy helps create a clearer bridge and path for players to enter and re-enter leagues. So, a partnership between the XFL and Alumni Academy on paper seems like the perfect marriage for all parties involved. A league looking for trained and pro-ready football players, an academy looking to have success in elevating their graduates, and the players better their chances of finding jobs. It's a win-win scenario, right? However, ironically, it's the numbers game that could affect the XFL's working relationship with the NFL Alumni Academy moving forward. And here's why. The problem? The numbers are not adding up. So the arrangement between the XFL and AA is simple on the surface. The two parties combine their scouting intel and data to select and then train players that they feel are NFL worthy. Graduates of the academy who don't end up in the NFL are promised an automatic opt-in roster spot on XFL teams in training camp. Notwithstanding the fact that there are no guarantees, a player on the 66-man training camp roster will make their final 50 for the regular season. Nonetheless, it is still a fair opportunity for the academy players. The plan is that academy conducts 4 player training sessions before the XFL league-wide training camp begins in January. Each academy session trains roughly 50 players, so AA hopes that at the maximum 200 of their graduates land on NFL teams comprised of 528 players in camp, 66 each on all 8 XFL teams. Before that, XFL player list gets whittled down to 400 for the regular season. In theory, the setup stands to benefit AA graduates and the academy because, as part of the agreement, the players gain an entry spot to pro football, to play pro football. And if an AA-trained player makes an active XFL roster during the season, the academy gets 30% of the player's weekly league salary to cover the complete cost of tuition. AA receives a portion of the weekly graduate salary until the $13,000 tuition is covered, something that the players do not owe unless they secure a job. If a player gets into the NFL, the expected free fee for the academy is $21,000. Okay, makes sense. Following the math so far? The success of transitioning graduates into a pro football league would help expand the academy in the future, open the door for more agents and players to choose them as the premier training grounds for pro football athletes just outside the NFL. But here is where the XFL and AA partnership have encountered issues that both sides are trying to resolve. As presently constituted league-wide, after the November's draft, the XFL and all 8 of their teams have 457 players combined, and the number could go down by January. After all, some of the league's drafted players have already found homes on NFL teams, and option players have until December 26, based on the terms in their signed letter of intent agreements. After 12/26, drafted players must commit to the XFL for 2023. So for the moment, that leaves presently only 71 roster spots open for the XFL's January supplemental draft. Individual teams can have no more than 66 players. For example, the Arlington Renegades only have 10 openings, with 56 players on their current roster, while others like the Orlando Guardians have only 6. Herein lies the rub. The XFL drafted 54 AA graduates in November, a good number, but far from expectations of the Academy, and with only 71 roster spots available for the supplemental draft as it stands right now. With the XFL teams expected to draft players with expiring contracts from other leagues like the NFL and USFL, it makes it impossible for the nearly 200 AA graduates to find a training camp spot in the XFL. Now do you understand what the problem is? Even if the league did add 71 Academy players in their next draft and ignored the outside football talents, it would still fall short of expectations under the agreement between the Academy and the XFL. Really, after the draft is when people started looking around being like, wait a second, this isn't going to work. Unnamed graduates from the NFL Alumni Academy who recently completed training have reached out to Mike Mitchell to express their disappointment in not being drafted by the XFL. So they were like, cool, I'll be in the NFL Alumni Academy. Worst case scenario, I'll get drafted in the XFL. Draft happens. They don't get selected. What the heck is going on? They were told that competing AA would guarantee them a shot. And it looks like it didn't for all of them. The Academy has been informing some players that camp spots will be available to them in January through the draft, but the numbers game will simply not be able to accommodate all the graduates. Solutions moving forward. Quite frankly, this is an issue that the XFL's football operations should have seen forthcoming. The demand is high to get into the league, so much so that sources have indicated that over 300 USFL players have reached out to intermediaries about joining the XFL in the new year. That is a lot of players interested in joining the XFL. One of the reasons, yes, the pay is a little bit more, but the other one is the timing, which agents have said what they like about the XFL more than the USFL and CFL is the timing that the season's over, that these guys can get into an NFL camp. But even though the USFL has also been able to get players in camp, but this would get them way earlier in the process. So that's not counting the over 100 players on NFL practice squads and on the fringe of them who have had contract with the league with the last several months. So on top of that, the XFL worked out over 1,500 players in 8 different player showcases across the country with all that extensive player scouting for an 8-team league that will field 400 players in the regular season. You see the problem. The numbers just don't add up. There's just simply not enough room for all those players in an 8-team league. Even the hopeful players currently on other leagues won't find job openings. That's where the main issue between the Academy and the XFL lies. For the XFL and the AA to continue on, they have to have some sort of financial compromise to make up for the number of graduates who won't get an opportunity to latch on an XFL roster before the season starts. Although the partnership between the AA and the XFL is an exclusive one, the XFL will need to open the door for graduates to pursue other opportunities beyond their league and the XFL. After all, if the XFL doesn't have room for these players, other leagues surely will. Hashtag the USFL. The plan was for AA grads to be at the ready during the XFL season in Arlington as the first line of call-ups and workout players in the likely event that teams incur injuries. Perhaps that can be expanded upon somewhat. During the XFL 2023 season, the Academy graduate pool is supposed to take the place of individual teams or centralized league practice squads. So maybe the XFL can increase their rosters from 50 to 52 or even 55 during the season, with AA grads serving as the only add-on additions. Okay, that would kind of work out, expanding the rosters. You remember, you don't want to upset the balance between you and the NFL. That would look bad for the league. So outside of expanding rosters, what's the financial solution? In layman's terms, perhaps the XFL can cut AA a check to help cover tuition costs lost by the academy. If AA was wishful hoping that 150 to 200 graduates made the league's active roster at $13,000 per player to cover tuition costs, the academy would receive 1.9 to 2.6 million, and that is the best case scenario. That is a big check to cut. Maybe it would be better to just expand the rosters. I don't know. What do you think? Based on the current roster availability and number of AA players currently on XFL rosters, even with an upcoming supplemental draft, it's more than likely that the number of grads ending up on and training camp rosters ends up being between 75 and 80 range tops. Even if, hypothetically, 75 academy players made an active roster and made a full XFL season, it would net the academy just $950,000, a far cry from what was expected by the AA. Perhaps the XFL can split the difference by paying to cover the academy's lost potential money. Who knows? So no one can easily surmise or understand the academy's point of view on the growing frustration in their partnership with the XFL because a commitment is not being honored to its fullest. Ultimately, it's always the players who end up getting shifted in the numbers game. Now, on a positive note and what is a negative development, there will be hundreds of players getting an opportunity to play pro football from January till May because of the existence of the XFL. Players will get a chance to play professionally and get game film during telecasts on ABC, ESPN, and FX. It's still a winning situation for some academy graduates like Hawaii standout and current San Antonio Brahma, Calvin Turner. However, from a PR standpoint, it can be a hit for the XFL for not only failing to live up to a promise, but miscalculating the demand of players who want to play in their league. In an effort to ensure a ready-made in-house pool of players to their league in a competitive landscape for talent, the XFL went into overprotective mode to guarantee a pipeline. Ultimately, the XFL has to find a way where everyone wins in the end, players, coaches, scouts, and everyone else who don't want to feel like they've been left stranded on the sidelines. We have check out XFL News Hub for our interview with Executive Director of the NFL Alumni Academy, Dean Dalton, talking about their partnership. But it seems like the numbers game is the problem for the XFL. Will they get this resolved? I have a feeling they will. I mean, basically, it's amongst friends. You know, there's lots of relationships between the XFL rank and file and the NFL Alumni Academy. So it's just a matter of figuring out what works for everyone. My guess of what I would do is, instead of cutting them a check for $2 million, is expand the XFL roster to a little bit more. The other thing is that the NFL Alumni Academy could bring in the USFL. And maybe the partnership is that the XFL gets first dibs and then the USFL gets the rest. That's also a possibility too, but I don't know if the USFL would want to do that. But having their name associated with the NFL would help their product as well. So we'll see what happens. Let us know in the comments. Again, another Mike Mitchell exclusive for XFL News Hub.